I had a coworker tell me that while we were at work, everything that we did was only work related and had nothing to do with spirituality. That's wrong. Everything that we do from the moment we wake up is spiritual. Every choice we make, every thought we think impacts our spiritual life and journey. It doesn't matter if it's at work or school or you're sitting home alone. It's easy to forget that the truth and reality of who we are isn't this character that we're playing, but the eternal spirit or soul, the awareness, the observer who's watching everything play out. And so even insignificant things like a dispute at work or communication challenges with coworkers or friends or family, all of it reflects our spiritual life. Even what we choose to do for fun. And I remember asking my coworker why she thinks that. And the reason was because there were certain things at work which were creating frustration and stress and anger. So for her, she separated those things from spirituality. For her, the idea of what she deemed as spiritual revolved only around joy and meditation and ambient music and doing psychedelics. And one of the core tenets of the spiritual life is understanding that all is one. We all come from the same source. Everything around us is one thing. And so I asked her, with that understanding, how can we then separate what we do at work from our spiritual journeys? And to separate anything, to make something separate from the spiritual journey is really a way of bypassing within ourselves. Oh, well, this is different. This is different, and it's stupid and frustrating and stressful because it's not spiritual. And all of a sudden we give ourselves excuses to not be our best self, to not tap into our higher selves, to not allow love and peace and joy to flow through, or understanding to flow through certain situations. Because now this isn't spiritual, this is work related, and this situation at work is stupid and my coworker is an idiot. And it's not spiritual. But remember, as spiritual beings, especially, I'm assuming if you're watching this, people who are at least semi-awake and understand the reality of who you are, everything is one thing. And we are all just individual perspectives of the whole. So what does that mean? When we say something is stupid, when we judge something as not spiritual, that's stupid, you're stupid, that coworker's dumb, my boyfriend or girlfriend, they're being retarded. You're really just judging yourself. And that doesn't necessarily mean you think that you're also stupid But it means that there's certain standards that you hold yourself to, which we then project onto others and expect them to hold that same standard. Why? Because it's all one thing. It's just a reflection of ourselves. So when somebody at work is creating some type of stressful situation or frustration or is being dumb in our opinion, it's not necessarily because what they're doing is something we do, but more often than not, what they're doing is something that we would never do because we have a certain standard we hold ourselves to. So this idea that certain situations and certain places and certain times in our life are not spiritual is only ever our own ego bypassing situations to let itself off the hook from growing. And every time we do something like that, ultimately what we're really doing is shouldering burdens that we don't need to shoulder. All these ideas that, well, this isn't spiritual and this person's being an idiot. What we're really doing when we're not allowing ourselves to grow is we're not allowing ourselves to let go of the burdens we have chosen to carry. And that's tiring. Not only for you, but for everybody else that we're judging and holding their trespasses against them. Because when we hold something against another, think about that. We have to continue to carry it and place it on them because we're the one placing it there. And so we're picking up these burdens and we think, well, it's not this spiritual. This isn't spiritual. This is separate. They need to deal with this. But what we do is we hold our judgments against them and we throw it to them. But nobody can pick up our judgments against them. And so ultimately we just hold on to it. And we feel heavy and frustrated. And so then we give ourselves the excuse, well, this person's being dumb and they need to grow because I know I am a spiritual person, but in this moment, I don't need to think about that. They need to think about that. But the moment we realize and remember, all of these moments, every moment, the only moment that exists right now, the present, is spiritual because that's the reality. That's how life goes. Can't exist without spirituality because life is spirit. It's all one thing. Ooh, it is so freeing. It doesn't immediately, you won't immediately feel better sometimes, but it's this gradual remembering of, I don't have to do this. I don't have to think this way. And then, who's the one thinking this way? It's very freeing. Lifting the burdens. One last thought on this. When we begin to remember that every moment is a spiritual moment and is a part of our spiritual journey, that doesn't make us responsible for the actions of others. All that we become responsible for is understanding. Because when we understand, we can forgive not only others, but even more importantly, ourselves. So when somebody's doing something causing pain or stress or frustration, it's not that we as spiritual, understanding people, it's not that we condone whatever that situation or behavior is, but that we understand why that it's happening. If we can't stand in somebody else's position, then we still believe that we're separate in some way. But when we begin to remember, everything's one, we're all one, we all exist, as Aaron Abke says, in relationship with each other, then we begin to understand. And then these feelings of frustration and annoyance, which come from the belief that things are separate from me and can inconvenience me, begins to subside over time. And so when your coworker is being toxic or annoying, or your spouse or whoever, we begin to, instead of immediately looking at them like they need to deal with this issue, we begin to have compassion, and we see that they're feeling fear of some kind, they're feeling insecurity of some kind, they feel out of control in some way, because we recognize those things within ourselves. Because as soon as we become irritated and frustrated with somebody else, and this situation's not spiritual and they need to do this, it's because we are bypassing our own insecurity and fears. Because the present moment is unfolding how it's going to unfold. And so when we look at something and we say, they need to do this, what we're really doing is we're taking ourselves out of the present moment, which is always unfolding and however it's going to unfold, and we're trying to control something. But when we try to control something that only ever exists in the present, we're removing ourselves. We're lagging behind now, and we're separating ourselves from the present. So when we begin to understand our own frustrations and fears and insecurities, we begin to see, I've been separating myself this whole time from the present. So when your coworker, boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband, friend, family member begins to act out in toxic ways or unhealthy ways or anger, again, we're not condoning behavior that's abusive or manipulative, but we understand it for what it is, as a misinterpretation, a misunderstanding of who that person ultimately is. And we begin to see them with new eyes of compassion, and we can forgive them. And again, when I say forgive, that doesn't mean we say, that's okay what you're doing. It just means, I understand why you're doing this, and you're afraid, or you're in pain, you're scared, or you feel powerless. And then we get to make a truly informed decision in the present moment. And sometimes that means removing ourselves from situations, breaking things off in a relationship, cooling things down. But most importantly, usually it means having some type of healthy boundary. Not because I don't accept you and I'm pushing you away, but because I fully accept you and I see you. And at this current moment in time, I'm going to remove myself because I care about myself. I'm going to put this boundary up because I care about myself. And because I see that at this point in time, you're going through something and you need to express whatever you need to express. And I accept that. Very freeing. And now you're no longer holding their trespasses against them. You're no longer separating yourself. This isn't a spiritual moment. You got to deal with your shit. No, the spiritual moment is always taking accountability and taking responsibility for you and your actions and for where you find yourself. Yeah, there we go. It's a beautiful, beautiful day today. Have a good one.